Welcome to our first Biology 12 video. Today we're going to look at how we determine whether something is living or not. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to list the 7 key characteristics of life, including that living things respond to stimuli, they grow, they acquire materials and energy, they maintain homeostasis, they are able to reproduce, they are organized, and they can adapt. As well, you should be able to use these 7 key characteristics to argue whether or not particular objects should be considered living or non-living, and begin to connect the 7 key characteristics of life to our understanding of how the human body functions. So to begin with, all living things respond to stimuli. This means they are able to react to changes within their external and internal environments. And indeed, our ability to respond to stimuli is a primary way we determine whether or not a human is alive or dead. In fact, we often will encounter or check if a human can react to sound by calling their name. This is external. Or to touch, we might shake them gently. Or if they don't respond to those two things, we might look further and see whether they are breathing or have a pulse, which are indicators that their body is still able to respond to internal stimuli. As well, all living things grow. You can think of yourself starting out as that sweet, cute little baby that you once all were, and progressing to the crawling stage, toddler, then maybe a child, small child, teddy bear in hand, to the teenage you, with your music and probably your phone, the adult you, maybe with a adult job, briefcase, bills. See, you're still smiling even though you have bills. To senior you, maybe you have time to do some golfing, traveling. To the elderly you. All living things, even though they don't go through the same stages, do grow. And growth can take on several forms, 2 of which we've seen in the above picture. Even though I didn't draw it to scale, we looked at increase in size over time, and we looked at passing through different developmental stages. So passing through various developmental stages. And another form of growth that many people don't recognize is the fact that when you are repairing or replacing damaged cells, that's a form of growth. Now, some of us have to do this more often than others just because we are a little more klutzy. And at younger stages, we're actually more effective at this compared to older stages. You've probably heard your parents complain they don't recover as fast as they did when they were younger. As well, all living things acquire materials and energy. In fact, that's critical for growth and for the next characteristic, maintaining homeostasis. Materials. In humans, we basically acquire materials and energy through eating. We'll include drinking in that. And through breathing. But not all living things acquire energy and materials in the same way. Some, like humans, are considered what we call heterotrophs. Meaning that we acquire our materials and energy from eating other living things. One key to being strong at biology is knowing where words come from, so I will constantly remind you of their roots. Hetero, you're probably already familiar with in terms of heterosexual. Hetero means other. And troph, if you think all the way back to Science 10, referred to trophic levels or feeding levels, means feeding. So these guys are other feedings or feeders, meaning they feed off of others. Some, like plants and some bacteria, are considered autotrophs, as they acquire their materials and energy from non-living sources such as sunlight, which are more specifically called photoautotrophs, and inorganic chemicals, some bacteria, which are called chemoautotrophs. In this case, you should know that auto does not mean your car. It means self. So an automatic car is able to shift its own transmission or shift itself. Autotroph, self-feeding. They don't have to live off of other living things. Okay? All living things also maintain homeostasis. Now that's probably a big new word for most of you. But it's actually quite simple to understand. Homeostasis is simply a fancy way of saying living things attempt to maintain balance. We don't mean as in standing up, because bacteria really don't work on that type of balance, but we mean by keeping a constant internal environment. So they don't want their internal conditions to shift too much one way or the other. Homeostasis is derived from Greek, with homeo meaning same, and stasis meaning stable. So it's actually quite a redundant word. It wants to maintain things the same and stable. So each living species has its own unique set of internal conditions that it must maintain in order to survive. The human body is no different. In fact, its entire functioning is actually set by its need to maintain these conditions. For example, breathing is to maintain O2, CO2 levels. Sweating or shivering is to maintain temperature. I'm just going to put equals temperature. We also have a variety of buffer systems to maintain our body's pH in places like our stomach, skin, and blood. And indeed, the process of consuming water, drinking, and the function of our kidneys helps to maintain homeostasis with respect to our water-salt balance. And our blood pressure. and indeed the entire Bio 12 course, is really looking at understanding how our body systems are designed to maintain homeostasis and how they fail to maintain homeostasis and what we can do about it in those situations.